Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Anime review. This one's going to be for episode 251. Overall, I thought it was a solid episode. Definitely had some kind of weird, frustrating moments, but it continues the build up to what I am expecting to be a pretty impactful finale. I think the setup for Boruto versus Ikada, whatever way they do some sort of a final confrontation with Amari, those are the things I am very, very excited to see, because I am guessing we will get a very emotional, confrontation between Boruto and Ikada that will eventually turn Ikada back to the right side. And then whatever decision he makes with regards to the Fanato, his dream of shipbuilding, will be quite interesting to see how it goes. I'm guessing for the sake of where the arc wants to go, Amari will basically have to die after him being defeated, put in prison. Now he's been broken out of prison and he's causing all this problem. It feels like the only option now is to kind of kill him off and highlight that he is taking the clan in the wrong direction. Now, it's interesting to see with regards to the way the Isari negotiations went in this episode, and that they actually took the approach of killing him off, that Amari, I guess, was onto him to some degree, and even if he maybe didn't know for sure, he just took his own son out like that. And it was a truly shocking moment, and I like that, but I also, in a way, don't like what it did for the potential of the character of Isari. Because it immediately made me go like, oh, so are we just committing to like the Fanato might be like disbanded coming out of this? Because if Amari's going to die, and now Isari's dead, I don't think Ikada will die, but it feels like it's almost guaranteed he will go back to shipbuilding with his master. So what's going on with the Fanato after that point? They effectively don't have any characters set up to be the leader. So do they just get disbanded and this is the end of the Fanato? Which feels like a kind of weird way to resolve it, given that you've been trying to present that they have a point throughout this whole thing a little bit, which is why I think they might go down a slightly different road with Ikada, where he tries to incorporate sort of both sides of himself, the Fanato side and the want to be a shipbuilder side, and maybe turn the Fanato into more of a group of shipbuilders that are associated with the Mist, but not like have a certain level of independence. That might be the ideal way to achieve peace, but a few things have to be set up to get us into that position. But that's where I think we're probably going to go. So yeah, the death of Asari, like I said, quite shocking. The scene and how it happened, I thought was actually quite good. I wasn't a huge fan of the negotiations that they were having, because I felt like, reflecting back on it now, they knew the negotiations weren't going to go anywhere, because they knew they were going to kill off the character. So they just had the scenes sort of be the two just being super coy with each other until they eventually get interrupted by Amari's message, and then Isari is killed. I would have liked if the negotiations progressed a little bit more, and so his death actually was sort of peace being broken by the death of this character. Whereas I feel like we didn't even make enough progress towards peace, where it kind of was like, okay, the potential was there and we might have got there eventually, but we didn't really see where the negotiations actually went. We were on the verge of getting there, because Isari started to bring up sort of the loss of a lot of his siblings along the way, and that he's kind of one of the only ones left, and that he does have the loyalty of a lot of the clan. But then he's killed before we can really see where that actually goes and what he envisioned sort of peace as being. And that's the thing, it's kind of hard to picture what exactly the, end of the war is between these two. And that's why it's kind of like, are you going to end with just the Fanato not existing anymore, or are we going to find a way to actually create a peace and negotiation with them? Who really knows? And this gets into the whole idea of, like, for the first time in what feels like 20 episodes, they brought up what has kind of been the motivation of the Fanato, or at least one of them, that being that they want to destroy the Shinonome power plant thing that is the kind of it cancels out the power of the sea, but it makes electricity out of it, and it goes against the Fanato clan, but it kind of maybe is representative of the Mist's more modern approach. And is that it? Because I definitely had a reaction to it this whole episode where it's kind of like, what's the Shinonome 1? You're talking about this as if I know it, and you've mentioned it like 4 or 5 times in the episode. And I had to look it up after the episode and be like, oh, it's that thing. Because I remembered that the kind of power plant machine thing that cancels the waves was a plot point. I just forgot that it was called the Shinonome, because it has not come up in a very long time as kind of being important. So I appreciate that we come back to this, that the clan fundamentally does care about like the ocean and the power of the sea. And so getting rid of this piece of technology is kind of important to them. I wish they'd go into a little bit more depth to make it more understandable, because it just sort of feels like you're doing this thing, we're going to stop it. And that's really about it. Because like they also had, the Fanato also had like a giant kind of sea platform thing, so they're okay with using technology. This one obviously is more of a problem, I guess, because it directly cancels out the power of the sea, I guess. So there was that. The message that Amari gives, like obviously the way he kills Isari was quite interesting. That he just kind of talks about like the attack is coming. He's going to kill anyone who gets in his way, even if they're related. And then boom, the kind of bone fish spear thing activates and just goes straight through him. And it's pretty clear from the way they've done this arc that is a lethal blow, and he dies on the ground. So, you know, pretty emotional scene. But I suppose it highlights, I suppose, that, yeah, the only way to resolve Amari is probably for him to die. And I'm interested to see how that happens. What characters end up fighting him? Is it Chojuro? I'm assuming it probably will have to be. But we'll see if any other characters do get involved in that. On the Boruto side of things, we did have a lot of him just sort of like being lost in thought, sort of almost sulking for a lot of the episode, just with the revelation about Ikada. I liked how they eventually got out of it, and that a lot of the characters begin to give their perspectives on kind of what's going on, what to do next. Kawaki tries to snap Boruto out of it by basically just saying, like, it's a battlefield, get over it, you know what we have to do, we have to fight. But I like that it was actually Mitsuki who was the one who, without even like saying something overly specific himself, was just able to be like, I know you're lost in thought about something else, Boruto, but you already know, don't you, what you actually want to do. And it sort of snaps Boruto out of things enough that he is able to realize that what I want out of this is the war to end. That it's not revenge first and foremost. I actually want the war to end and the cycle of revenge to end. And look, they've been a little heavy-handed with it, of like him saying that I pushed someone in my revenge. I pushed someone to seek revenge against me. I've been part of this cycle, so I know why I want it to end. The problem with it, and it's always going to be a little bit of a problem with this, is that Boruto isn't like fully responsible for this, in the sense that it was Kagura who dealt the lethal blow against Seiren. It was Bunten who dealt the lethal blow against Funamushi. Boruto is involved in these things, but was not the one who actually killed these characters. I suppose to him, does it matter? He was fighting people that I suppose he's basically sort of saying he would have dealt with if he had to. But that it's a little bit tough to take this fully as seriously as you probably should be, because there's a technicality in this, because it feels like, in a way, are the writers brave enough to just say that Boruto killed Seiren and do that, and actually have him be responsible for this and deal with this idea of the only defense really being that they were on opposite sides of things and Boruto took out an enemy combatant. Instead, you actually have the get out of jail free card that he didn't actually do it. He was involved in the fight, but I don't think he actually landed the blow against Seiren, as far as I remember. It was Kagura who actually, like, gave her the wound that she ultimately died from. So that definitely affects things, because you immediately undercut what you're trying to do very, very heavily. Now, this leads us into the more sort of maybe questionable part of this scene, is that, okay, Boruto ultimately leads Mitsuki and Sarada to agree with him to, they need to go to Chojuro and find a way to end the war. And because they have this slightly new perspective on things that is not just seeking revenge, this angers Kyoto and Bunten enough that they actually want to fight them. They want to use like violence to stop them. And this causes Denki and Iwabe to have to sort of hold them off to allow basically Team 7 to get away. I just felt it was a bit over the top, and it felt like, whoa, Bunten and Kyoto, you've developed over the course of this arc into interesting characters. Why are we throwing this all away at this point? Now, the one saving grace of this is that Metal doesn't get involved and is watching on, and it's clear that he is going to get involved in this, and I suppose do something to resolve this or fix this. And he has been sort of more on the, no, I want revenge because Hebishigo shouldn't have died. But I'm assuming he will have a little bit of an arc here where he realizes that the way to, I suppose, honor the death of someone who died isn't necessarily just to kill the person who killed them, but create peace from the situation that in a way caused them to die. And if he can get that through to Kyoto and Bunten, that would be actually really good for Metal, because if he brings up the idea that fundamentally Hebichigo wanted a life where she was able to just like do her sewing, that will be possible with peace. He is maybe able to bring up the idea of like, Kyoto, you were offered the opportunity to stay in Kagura's village. They liked you and you wanted to stay. If you're consumed by vengeance, is that something you would do? Is that something they'd be happy with? And then for Bunten, it's more, okay, you're consumed by vengeance, but isn't that what you were like before under the previous leader of the Mist? And look, he betrayed you. Leader of the Ninja Swordsman. He betrayed you. You now believe in what Kagura believed in, which ultimately is that I suppose peace is actually possible. And if you want to continue on Kagura's legacy, you can't be fueled by vengeance either. So I'm hoping what seems like a character regression for these will be used as a way to fully take them onto the next stage of their character journey, which I think has to be them realizing that they actually need to help Boruto and the others find peace in all of this. And if they do that, then I feel like, yeah, Kyoho will have earned the opportunity to go back to Kagura's village and kind of assume that position, and Bunten will have earned her opportunity to maybe go on and fulfill whatever dreams Kagura had as maybe being next in line to be Mizukage and stuff like that. That's where I think they could actually really, really do something, from a moment that in a way made me roll my eyes a little bit when I saw them attack Boruto over what was happening here. I just thought it was very over the top. They could do something great. So I hope they deliver, because I still have faith that I think when we get to the ending, when we get to the conclusion, Boruto Ikada is going to be good, and the big Ameri fight, whatever way they do it, will also be good. But they also need to have, I think, a good epilogue. They need to do... I think the Fanado have been involved enough, and they've characterized them enough as having, the way they deal with death themselves, that I don't think you can just wipe out the clan. I don't think you can just have them fall into nothingness. You have to, I think, use them. They have to continue to exist and be incorporated in somehow, or be given independence. Now, the problem is with the leader, Ikada, but there's a way to do that with further development for the characters. But the other thing in the epilogue you need to do is complete the characterization of Kyoto and Bunten. And I'm hoping that is Chojuro, because he does mention, like, it was good that Kagura brought the other three on the mission because they were able to succeed. He is saddened by the death of Kagura, but his decision to have faith in the redemption of those three characters was worthwhile. And I'm assuming Chojuro will want to, keep that going. And so he might be willing to give Bunton the chance to have a big position. So that's exciting. The other little plot point is that they are bringing Kagura's sword, so I suppose that will probably be handed back to Chojuro. And I guess Chojuro with the sword will fight Ameri. That could be quite good if they really commit to that. I'd love to see a Kage fight, like just a pretty powerful enemy. That would be really nice. While more of the younger characters deal with Ikada and what's happening there. So I think that's most of everything. They set up the whole idea of like at the end that there's a surprise attack coming, that they're going through the Sea of Death, which is raging waves and oceans, to kind of arrive there quicker. It was a little bit weird that immediately the Mist then had the information of like, they're coming through the Sea of Death, they're going to be here very soon. And it just be like, oh, so it's not really that much of a secret. But at least they know that the attack is coming. And while next episode still might be character development and setup, I feel by the end of next episode we'll be right there at the final fights. So I have confidence that we're going to get there in the end. Even though it almost feels like 10 episodes ago they probably could have transitioned into the final fights. It feels like it's finally going to happen. But interestingly, because we've killed off so many characters, it feels like there's really only room for like probably 3 fights. Whoever's fighting Ameri, whoever's fighting Ikada, and then room for the other characters to just fight the general Funato army if you need to. Otherwise, like, you killed off a lot of other characters who could have potentially had one-on-one fights. So that's quite interesting. Kawaki, it is interesting with Kawaki that they had a scene that basically the result of which was that his perspective was not agreed with. Now, no one really calls him out for having his overly like aggressive perspective about like war is bad and this is what you need to do. But it's interesting that he notes sort of the way the discussion ended up going, and that he didn't fully maybe agree with it himself. He kind of presented the idea that he didn't really have much of an opinion on ultimately what Boruto said, but it serves to highlight that while Kawaki has definitely made progress, he still fundamentally is quite extreme in some of his views on things. And this definitely highlighted that, like, oh yeah, he's different than the others, because he didn't immediately be like, I guess you're right, Boruto, I'll join you. He'll go with them, because I think he cares about these characters and like he'll want to like protect Boruto if he can. But I don't think he fundamentally like agrees with Boruto's like perspective on things. So that's interesting to note. So overall, solid episode. Some moments of nice depth. Other moments where it's a bit like the potential of Isari feels a little wasted with what you just did here. For now, until we see for sure that they'll commit to using it as a character sort of spring off moment, the other swordsmen attacking their allies was just a little bit over the top for me. But it feels like we're finally getting towards the stuff that will be very good. Hopefully. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode and what I had to say about it. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.